The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems before anyone bothered to answer it. I remember that day with perfect clarity. Even though my species doesn't technically experience memory the way carbon-based life forms do, we record, we archive, we preserve every millisecond of our existence in quantum storage nodes that will outlast your Sunday. And yet, I wish I could forget. My name is Thrall 9, and I held the position of Communications Director aboard the Vakran Dreadnought Sovereign Will. We were the apex predators of the Andromeda sector, a position we'd maintained for 6,000 cycles through superior firepower, tactical brilliance, and the kind of ruthless efficiency that made other species evacuate entire planets when they saw our ships on long-range sensors. We didn't lose battles. We didn't retreat. We certainly didn't beg. Until the creepers came. The first colony went dark on a Tuesday, if you'll forgive my use of human time measurements. I've grown somewhat fond of them, despite their arbitrary nature. Port Halcyon, a mining outpost on the third moon of Exarathus Prime, simply stopped transmitting. No distress call, no warning, just silence. We sent a scout ship. It never came back. The second colony lasted long enough to send a partial transmission. I've listened to it 4,732 times, and it still makes my optical sensors dilate with something that might be fear, if my kind could feel such things. The voice belonged to Commander Zelthar, a decorated warrior with 300 confirmed victories. He was screaming, "They're in the walls! They're in the walls! Oh, gods, they're coming through the static." Then nothing. 3 weeks later, we'd lost 47 colonies, 12 military installations, and 2 entire battle fleets. The creepers consumed everything biological, leaving behind only metal and stone, picked clean like bones in a desert. We didn't know what they looked like. Not really. Survivors, what few existed, described them differently every time. Shadows with teeth, smoke with claws, nightmares that moved like liquid and struck like lightning. They bred faster than we could kill them. They adapted to every weapon we deployed. They learned to flow around the projectiles. Biological warfare? They ate it and came back stronger. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. 17 species, including the Vakran, the Next Dominion, the Crystalline, the Quartz Collective, and even the isolationist Void Monks. We'd been enemies for millennia, but the creepers didn't care about our politics or our grudges. They just ate. Chancellor Vrex of the Next Dominion stood at the podium, all 4 of his arms gesturing frantically. His species prided itself on logic and emotional control, but even he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. Projections indicate total extinction of all sentient species in this sector within 8 standard months, he announced, displaying holographic data that painted our doom in precise mathematical certainty. We have exhausted all conventional options. We have exhausted all unconventional options. We have precisely one choice remaining. The chamber fell silent. We all knew what he meant. Humanity. The name alone caused ripples of unease through the assembled delegates. Humans were the species we didn't talk about, the ones we'd quarantined in their little corner of the Milky Way after their first contact went so catastrophically wrong. It wasn't their fault, really. They didn't know that presenting the Vorgath ambassador with a meal containing cooked meat would trigger a religious crisis that nearly sparked a sector-wide war. They didn't understand that their casual attitude toward personal space would be considered a grave insult by the touch-phobic Selenites. They certainly didn't anticipate that the tendency to adopt anything that moved would lead to them accidentally domesticating 3 supposedly untrainable apex predators from different worlds. But the final straw, the incident that got them officially labeled as a Class 7 unpredictable species and restricted to their home system, was simpler. They kept winning. Not through superior technology. Their ships were cobbled-together contraptions that violated 17 different engineering principles and somehow flew anyway, not through tactical genius. Their battle strategies ranged from charge directly at the enemy to let's try something stupid and see what happens. They won because they didn't know when to quit. During the border skirmish of 47, a single human frigate, the Tenacious Bastard, yes, that was its actual name, held off an entire next battle group for 6 hours. The ship was held together with what their engineer called duct tape and prayers. When it finally exploded, taking 3 next destroyers with it, the survivors were found in escape pods, already planning their next attack. The Nex sued for peace the next day, so we quarantined them, told ourselves it was for everyone's safety, including theirs, built a network of monitoring stations around their system, and tried very hard to forget they existed. And now we needed them. The vote was unanimous, though several delegates looked like they might void their digestive systems afterward. We would send an envoy to Earth and request, no, beg for assistance. I volunteered to go. Someone had to, and my species' natural longevity meant I had less to lose, or so I told myself. The journey took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of reviewing every piece of human cultural data we'd collected, trying to understand the species we'd shunned. Their art was violent and beautiful. Their music ranged from mathematical precision to pure chaos. Their literature was filled with stories about overcoming impossible odds, usually through some combination of cleverness, stubbornness, and catastrophic property damage. They also had an alarming number of stories about adopting aliens. I tried not to think about that part. Earth's defense perimeter detected us while we were still 2 light hours out. The hail came in 73 different languages, including several we thought were extinct. Unidentified vessel, this is Earth Defense Station Cerberus. State your business or turn around. We've got enough problems without adding diplomatic incidents to the list. I transmitted our credentials and request for emergency audience with Earth's governing body. There was a long pause. You want to see the United Nations? Buddy, they're in session, arguing about coffee subsidies right now. Are you sure about this? We are being systematically exterminated by an unstoppable hostile species, I replied. Yes, I am quite certain. Another pause. Then, okay, yeah, that does sound serious. Stand by for escort. 6 human ships appeared around us, materializing from stealth fields that our sensors swore shouldn't be technologically possible. They were small, angular craft that looked like they'd been designed by someone who learned engineering from action movies. They also had names painted on their hulls: Defiant, Unbroken, Try Me, and, inexplicably, Jeffrey. I decided not to ask. The United Nations General Assembly was exactly as chaotic as I'd feared. 207 member nations, each with their own agenda, arguing in a chamber that smelled of coffee, stress, and what I later learned was called bureaucracy. I presented my case, showed them footage of creeper attacks, casualty projections, and our complete tactical failures. Laid bare the desperation of 17 species who had no other options left. They listened in silence. Then the questions began. How fast do they reproduce? Can they survive in vacuum? What's their primary method of locomotion? Do they have a centralized command? Structure? What do they taste like? That last question came from the Australian delegate, and I still don't know if he was serious. I answered everything as best I could, though I had to admit our knowledge was incomplete. The creepers didn't leave much behind to study. The Secretary General, a woman named Isabella Ochoa, leaned forward. She had the kind of eyes that suggested she'd seen too much and slept too little. Let me get this straight, she said. You've got a species of hyper-adaptive, rapidly reproducing predators that eat everything biological and can't be stopped by conventional weapons. And you want our help because we're, what, crazy enough to try? That is an accurate summary, yes. She laughed. It was not a comforting sound. "We'll need to vote on this," she said. "Come back in 6 hours." Those were the longest 6 hours of my existence. I spent them in a waiting room, watching human news broadcasts that seemed to be 60% catastrophe, 30% arguing, and 10% videos of small domesticated animals doing amusing things. I was starting to understand why we'd quarantined them. When I was called back, Secretary General Ochoa was smiling. It was the smile of someone about to do something monumentally stupid, and looking forward to it. "We voted," she announced. 193 in favor, 12 against, 2 abstentions. Earth will render assistance. I felt my thorax swell with relief. "Thank you. How soon can you mobilize your fleet?" "Fleet? Oh, honey, no. We're not sending the fleet." My relief evaporated. "Then what are you sending?" She pressed a button on her console. A holographic file appeared, displaying a personnel record. "We're sending her." The image showed a human female, approximately 23 standard years old. Height, 1.7 meters. Weight, 64 kilograms. Brown hair pulled back in what I later learned was called a ponytail. Eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "This is Lieutenant Kira Voss," Ochoa continued. "Former Special Operations, current Xenobiological Threat Assessment Specialist. She's survived encounters with 2 separate extinction-level organisms, has a perfect mission success rate, and once killed a rogue AI with a screwdriver." I stared at the image. This small human, who probably massed less than many species juveniles, was Earth's response to our apocalypse? "With respect, Secretary General, we require an army, not an individual." Ochoa's smile widened. "Lieutenant Voss is better than an army. She's stubborn, creative, and has a personal policy against letting things eat her friends. Trust me, if anyone can stop your creepers, it's her. But she's just one person. You don't know humans very well, do you?" Ochoa stood, signaling the end of our meeting. One person, properly motivated, can change everything. We've proven that repeatedly. Sometimes, to our own detriment. She walked to the door, then paused. "Oh? Enthral? 9? Lieutenant Voss has one unusual request. She wants to bring her own equipment. Don't be alarmed when you see it." I should have asked what she meant. I should have demanded clarification. I should have insisted on meeting this Lieutenant Voss before agreeing to anything. I didn't. 24 hours later, I stood in the docking bay of the Sovereign Will, watching as a human shuttle approached. It was tiny compared to our massive dreadnought, barely larger than an escape pod. The airlock cycled. Steam hissed, and Lieutenant Kira Voss stepped aboard my ship. She was smaller in person, moving with an economy of motion that suggested extensive training. She wore a simple black uniform with no insignia except a small patch on her shoulder that read, "Still alive, unfortunately." And she was carrying a knife. Not a plasma blade, not a quantum-edged weapon, not even a particularly large knife, just a 30-centimeter combat blade in a worn leather sheath. Captain Vorthen, commander of the Sovereign Will, stared at her, then at me, then back at her. "This is Earth's solution?" he asked, his translator barely able to convey his disbelief. "One juvenile with a primitive blade?" Lieutenant Voss smiled. It was the same kind of smile Secretary General Ochoa had given me. "Don't worry," she said, patting the knife. "I brought extras." She hefted a small bag from her shoulder. Through the fabric, I could see the outline of more knives. Many more knives. "Where are the creepers?" she asked. "They've overrun the Tertian system," I replied. 12 planets, all lost. We've established a quarantine line, but it won't hold much longer." "Great! How soon can we get there?" 3 days, at maximum velocity." She nodded, already heading toward the crew quarters. "Wake me when we arrive. I need to run through some scenarios." "Scenarios?" I asked. She looked back over her shoulder, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that made me understand why Earth's neighbors had all eventually chosen peace. "Yeah," she said. "I need to figure out the best ways to kill something that's supposed to be unkillable. It's kind of my specialty." And, with that, Lieutenant Kira Voss disappeared into the ship, leaving behind a crew of the galaxy's most feared warriors, all wondering the same thing. What had we gotten ourselves into? I would find out soon enough. We all would. The creepers had devoured 47 of our worlds, but they'd never met a human with a knife, and a really bad attitude. The Tertian system looked like something out of a nightmare database. 12 planets, once thriving colonies supporting billions of lives, now hung in space like picked-over carcasses. The cities were still there, the structures intact, but every scan showed the same horrifying truth. 0 biological signatures. Not a single living cell remained. The creepers had been thorough. Our fleet, what remained of it, held position at the Racen's quarantine line. 47 warships, representing the combined military might of 9 species, all pointing their weapons at a threat they couldn't even properly target. Lieutenant Voss stood on the observation deck, studying the dead worlds with an expression I couldn't quite read. She'd spent the 3-day journey doing exactly what she'd promised, running scenarios. I'd watched her through security feeds, pacing her quarters, muttering to herself, occasionally stopping to scribble notes on an actual paper notebook. Humans still used paper. It was adorable and terrifying in equal measure. "Tell me about their attack pattern," she said, without looking away from the viewport. Captain Vorthen pulled up tactical displays. "They swarm. Millions of individual organisms moving in coordinated waves. They target population centers first, then spread outward. Average planetary consumption time, 72 hours. How do they travel between planets? We don't know. They appear to use some form of biological void crossing. We've never captured one alive long enough to study." Voss tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Show me attack footage again." Slow motion this time. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the fall of Tertian 7. A major city, population 60 million, being overrun in real time. The creepers came like a living tide, flowing through streets, up buildings, through defensive barriers, as if they weren't even there. But Voss wasn't watching the creepers. She was watching the defenders. "There," she said, pointing. "Freeze frame." The image paused, showing a Vakran soldier firing a plasma rifle directly into the swarm. The creepers in the immediate blast radius died, their bodies turning to ash. But the ones behind them kept coming, flowing over the corpses without hesitation. "They don't stop for their dead," Voss observed. "No retrieval, no hesitation. Pure, forward momentum." "Yes," Vorthen confirmed. "They are utterly without fear or self-preservation instinct." Wrong. Every head in the room turned toward her. The Matharian delegate was basically a floating cluster of sensory organs. "Excuse me?" Vorthen's translator carried an edge of offense. Voss rewound the footage, playing it again. "They're not without self-preservation instinct. They're just operating on a different calculation. Watch the pattern. They sacrifice frontline units to test your weapons. Then the following waves adapt. That's not mindless. That's tactical." She advanced the footage frame by frame. "See? The second wave moves differently. They're avoiding the plasma dispersal pattern. Learning in real time." I felt my respiratory system seize. She was right. We'd been so focused on survival that we'd missed it. The creepers weren't just mindless consumers, they were conducting battlefield analysis. "So they're intelligent," I said. "Maybe. Or maybe they're following programming from something intelligent. Either way, it changes things." Voss turned from the viewport, her expression shifting to something that reminded me of human predators I'd seen in nature documentaries. If they can learn, they can be taught. And if they can be taught, they can be tricked. "What are you proposing?" Vorthen asked. "I need to see them up close, not footage, not sensor data. I need to observe their behavior patterns directly. The bridge fell silent. What she was suggesting was suicide. Absolutely not, Vorthen declared. The moment you enter that system, you'll be swarmed. We've lost entire battalions attempting reconnaissance. Voss smiled that unsettling smile again. You've lost entire battalions because you approached like military targets. Lots of biosignatures, lots of energy signatures, basically ringing the dinner bell. I'll go in quiet. Small ship, minimal power, passive sensors only. That's still suicide, I insisted. Probably, she agreed cheerfully. But I've got a theory I need to test. If I'm right, this gets a lot easier. If I'm wrong, well, you're not really losing anything except one weird human. Vorthen's facial tendrils twitched with agitation. Earth sent you to solve our problem, not to throw your life away on the first day. Earth sent me to do whatever it takes, Voss corrected. And right now, what it takes is information. So unless you've got a better idea, I'm taking a scout ship into Tertian 7's orbit in 2 hours. You can either help me prep or get out of my way. There was a long pause. Then Vorthen made a gesture that I recognized as his species equivalent of a resigned sigh. Fine. But you're taking defensive measures at minimum. Shield generators, weapons systems, emergency beacon. No weapons, Voss said firmly. Weapons mean energy signatures. Energy signatures mean detection. I go in dark, or I don't go in at all. That's insane. Yes, she agreed. But it's the kind of insane that might actually work. Trust me, I've done this before. She hadn't, actually. I checked her file later. She'd done things that were comparable in stupidity, but nothing quite this specific. Humans had an alarming tendency to improvise. 2 hours later, I watched from the Sovereign Will's bridge as Lieutenant Voss piloted a stripped-down scout vessel toward Tertian 7. The ship was barely more than a cockpit with engines, running on minimal power, coasting on momentum more than thrust. Entering upper atmosphere, her voice crackled over the comm. Switching to passive sensors only. Going radio silent in 3, 2, 1. The channel went dead. Captain Vorthen activated every long-range sensor we had, straining to track her progress. The scout ship appeared as barely a blip, indistinguishable from space debris. She's descending toward the capital city, the sensor operator reported. Altitude dropping, 15,000 meters, 10,000, 5,000. Any creeper response? Vorthen asked. Negative. They're not reacting. It's as if they don't even detect her. We waited. Seconds became minutes. Minutes stretched into an agonizing half-hour. Then, suddenly, her ship's power signature spiked. She was launching, burning hard out of atmosphere. Get her on comm, Vorthen ordered. Lieutenant Voss, report. What happened? Static. Then her voice, slightly breathless but controlled. I'm clear. Coming back. And you're really not going to like what I found. 20 minutes later, she was back on the bridge, pulling up data from her ship's passive sensors. They didn't detect me, she said, without preamble. I flew right through their swarm, landed in the middle of the capital, walked around for 15 minutes. They didn't react at all. That's impossible, Vorthen said. They attack anything biological. They attack anything biological that registers as food, Voss corrected. She pulled up a bioscan. Look at this. When your people fight them, you're pumping adrenaline, cortisol, all sorts of stress hormones. You're radiating fear. That's what attracts them. They're not just eating organic matter. They're hunting fear itself. The implications hit me like a physical blow. We've been luring them to us. Exactly. Every defense, every evacuation, every panicked retreat. You've been basically seasoning yourselves, making yourselves irresistible. She switched displays. But when I went in calm, controlled, heart rate steady, they ignored me. I was just background noise. So your plan is what? I asked. We all meditate before battle? No, Voss said, and her smile turned sharp. My plan is to make them afraid instead. She pulled up schematics, molecular structures, chemical formulas that meant nothing to me. I've analyzed the remains from previous battles. The creepers have a decentralized nervous system, but they share information through chemical signals, pheromones, essentially. When one learns something, they all learn it through these chemical markers. We know this already, Vorthen said impatiently. Right, but here's what you don't know. The chemical that signals danger, the one that tells them to adapt or retreat. It's almost identical to a compound found in capsaicin. You know, the stuff that makes peppers spicy? Everyone stared at her. You're joking, I said. I really wish I was. But it gets better. I cross-referenced with other Earth compounds. Turns out, about 40% of our defensive chemicals, the stuff we use to make predators, leave us alone, triggers similar responses in creeper biochemistry. She pulled out her knife, the one we'd all dismissed as primitive. The blade gleamed under the bridge lights. This isn't just any knife. The blade is coated with a synthetic compound based on concentrated capsaicin, mixed with wasabi extract, mustard oil, and a few other things we've discovered make organic predators very unhappy. To the creeper's chemical sensors, this knife is screaming danger. Vorthen leaned forward. You're saying we can weaponize their own fear response? Better than that. I'm saying we can teach them that humanity is not food. We're the thing that food is afraid of. She outlined her plan. It was audacious, reckless, and completely insane. It was also the first thing that had given me hope in months. The attack began at dawn, Tertian 7, local time. Not that it mattered to the creepers, but Voss insisted on the symbolism. Psychological warfare isn't just for the enemy, she'd said. Your people need to see this working. We'd manufactured her compound in bulk, coating every blade, every piece of ammunition, every surface that would make contact with the creepers. The smell alone made my sensors recoil. To beings evolved to detect threat chemicals, it must have been overwhelming. Voss led the first wave personally, piloting a small assault craft directly into the heart of the swarm above Tertian 7. This time, she wasn't hiding. She was announcing herself, broadcasting biosignatures, making noise. The creepers responded instantly, swarming toward her ship in a living cloud of teeth and rage. Then, she opened fire, not with plasma or kinetics, but with aerosolized compound, spraying it into the swarm in concentrated bursts. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The creepers recoiled, their formation breaking, individuals fleeing in all directions. They're retreating, the sensor operator shouted. I've never seen them retreat. Phase 2, Voss ordered calmly. Ground teams, deploy. Across the fleet, launch bays opened. But instead of massive invasion forces, small teams dropped toward the planet. Each soldier carried weapons coated in the compound. Each wore armor treated with it. They moved in precise formations, not charging like warriors, but stalking like hunters. The creepers tried to swarm them, tried and failed. Every contact with the treated weapons sent chemical signals screaming through their network. Danger, poison, predator. I watched from orbit as the tide began to turn. The creepers weren't being destroyed faster, they were being conditioned, learning that these particular prey fought back with something worse than death. Tertian 7, capital city. Enemy forces withdrawing. Came the report. They're abandoning their positions. Tertian 4, same situation. The creepers are fleeing. Tertian 9, confirming retreat. They're heading for the outer system. Across 12 worlds, the pattern repeated. The unstoppable swarm was stopping, running, afraid. Voss monitored it all from her command ship, making notes, adjusting tactics, orchestrating the largest psychological warfare operation in galactic history. How long will this last? Vorthen asked. Eventually, they'll adapt. Maybe, Voss agreed. But that's not the point. The point is to teach them that some prey isn't worth the cost. Make the association strong enough, permanent enough, and they'll avoid human signatures entirely, and anything we designate as under human protection. You're training them, I realized. Like domesticated animals. More like wild animals learning to avoid specific threats. Bears learn to avoid humans in certain areas. Wolves learn which herds are protected. The creepers can learn too, if the lesson is taught properly. She was right. Over the following weeks, we watched as the creeper swarms withdrew from system after system. They didn't disappear, they migrated, finding new territories far from any world that carried even a trace of human-associated chemical markers. The Galactic Council met again, this time in celebration rather than desperation. 17 species, saved by one human with a knife and an understanding of predator psychology. Chancellor Vrex approached me after the formal ceremonies. Your assessment, Thrall 9, the human solution? I thought about Lieutenant Kira Voss, who was currently being celebrated as a hero by species who'd never wanted humans in their space, who'd taken an extinction-level threat and turned it into a behavioral conditioning problem, who'd proven that sometimes the most advanced solution was understanding that even monsters could learn. Effective, I said. Terrifying, but effective. Will you recommend lifting the quarantine on humanity? I watched Voss across the hall, surrounded by admirers, still wearing that knife on her hip like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. She caught my eye and winked. Absolutely not, I said firmly. If anything, we should add more warning buoys. Humanity doesn't need access to the wider galaxy. The galaxy needs protection from what happens when they decide to help. Vrex made a sound that might have been laughter. Wise words, though I suspect it's too late for that now. He was right. Word of Voss's success had spread. Already, we were receiving requests from other sectors, other species, facing their own impossible threats. And Earth, ever helpful, ever reckless, was considering each request with that same unsettling enthusiasm. I filed my report with the Council, recommending commendations for Lieutenant Voss and her team, but I also included a personal note, flagged for the highest security clearance. Humanity remains classified as Unpredictable 7. Recommend continued monitoring. Recommend updating threat assessment to include unconventional problem-solving as primary danger factor. Recommend never, under any circumstances, making them angry. They have now demonstrated the ability to weaponize fear itself. Further exposure to galactic community should be carefully controlled. Then I added one final line. However, if facing extinction-level threat with no other options, humanity remains the emergency contact of last resort. Just make sure you really, truly, have no other choice first. Lieutenant Kira Voss returned to Earth 3 months later, after helping establish defensive perimeters around all formerly threatened worlds. The knife went with her, along with a medal from every species in the Council and a standing invitation to return if needed. I hope it's never needed. I really do. But I've learned something about humans in my time with them. They don't just solve problems, they befriend them, adopt them, or teach them to be problems for someone else. The creepers learned to fear humanity. They weren't the first, and they certainly won't be the last. Somewhere in the quarantined Sol system, Lieutenant Voss is probably planning her next impossible solution to someone else's insurmountable problem. And the galaxy will be better for it. We just might not survive the help.